Morning in Seacroft. No B-roll today, we're straight onto the bus, and it's a long one. Or a long two. I can explain, but I can't guarantee it'll make any sense. Leeds has an outer circular bus, numbered 9, or 9C, depending on which way round and round the wheels on the bus are going. It's a recent addition to the route lineup, as local company SquarePeg combined the number 9 and another different 9, we'll get to it, into a circular route that starts and ends at the White Rose. The entire loop takes about 3 hours, and we're doing almost all of it today. From the White Rose, the loop goes through, or near, Middleton, Rothwell, Garforth, Crossgate, Seacroft, Shadwell, Moortown, Wheatwood, Horsforth, Rodley, Farsley, Pudsey, Farnley and Wortley. I can't believe I got through all that in one breath, and I think I only made one mistake. I'm actually riding the other way around the loop, as it happens, on the 9C, because the timings happen to line up better. In fact, I wasn't intending to film this at all. This route was on my problems for future Cal list. But I was in Seacroft, and the bus happened to be boarding at a time when I needed to go to Horsforth, so on impulse I decided to add an extra hour to my journey, go the long way round, and take this one off. From Seacroft, our first stop is Crossgates. We'll come back here another time when the sun isn't washing out the video. There are a few things I want to visit around here, most notably what may be the best pie shop in Leeds. Next is Garforth. By this point we're about a third of the way back to York. We'll be coming back through here at some point. But I do briefly want to touch on the fact that Garforth has more railway stations than Leeds. 2, in fact. There are trains between York and Leeds via Garforth, and East Garforth is on the Transpennine Express line to Hull. Of course, fares are about as ridiculous as you'd expect for the north of England, with a day return from York to Garforth setting you back just north of 20 quid for a 20-minute journey. Anyway, Rothwell's next. It's a bit of Leeds that didn't want to be a bit of Leeds. When the council areas were being divvied up in the 1970s, they wanted to be a part of Wakefield. The House of Commons said yes, but the House of Lords basically said, on your bike. So part of Leeds they are. Rothwell Town Hall is still in use today as a Leeds City Council hub, and there's supposedly a carnival here once a year, which I missed by about a month. Pity really, I could have used a bit of a change of pace. Ever onward, we hop over the M1 motorway just south of Sturton Park and Ride. Not close enough to be useful though. Middleton's next, which we've already covered. We serve both Middleton Centre and the centre of Middleton on this bus. Then it's a quick sprint down the ring road and we pull into the White Rose, where it's all change as this bus goes out of service. When it comes to public transport, a circle does have to start and end somewhere, and that somewhere is the White Rose Shopping Centre. I used the 10-minute break to stop for provisions, and then got on to the next bus. Different bus, different driver, same stand, and carried on to Horsforth. Wortley's next, though only the industrial end. Farnley, another place I used to call home, barely gets a look in, and at this point we'd normally get on the dual carriageway, and immediately get off it again, not even merging with traffic. But the junction's shut for roadworks, so we wiggle around East Pudsey a bit. Looks nice enough, and it gets even nicer as we head into Pudsey proper. I don't think I've talked about Pudsey before, and we will be back here again several times, so there's no sense in making this video much longer. But I like Pudsey. Yes, by some standards, it's yet another town in the Leeds commuter belt, but Pudsey has a small 2-day market which was open and quite busy on the day I filmed this. It's got a good-sized leisure centre. I have some good memories from there. The post office is still open. There's a B&M that's basically a TARDIS, a tiny shop front that goes a very long way back, a Greggs, a Sainsbury's, a couple of local pubs. What more could you want? We continue across the ring road and skirt the edge of the Owlcote Centre, home of the Asda Supercentre, a 2-storey hypermarket version of Asda which is chronically understaffed. Then we head up to Farsley and Rodley. I've never been to either of these places, and Farsley in particular interests me with their rather well-respected non-league football team, Farsley Celtic. Maybe I'll get invited along to a game sometime, who knows. I also spotted one of my favourite kinds of place, an independent bookshop. Bit of a dying breed. Love to see them. Across the river, our route takes us away from the traffic and into the riverside community of Horsforth Vale. Not close enough to actually see the River Aire, mind. Then we have this narrow, windy road, and I was amazed at how fast the driver took us up. Fortunately, it's all one way up here. And finally, we emerge into Horsforth proper. We pass the Toby Carvery, and I got off at Morrison's. The number 9 continues up towards Horsforth railway station and then back towards Seacroft through north of Leeds. But I didn't cover that bit because I was where I needed to be now. Now that we've covered the journey itself, let's back up a little because I do want to talk about the recent history of the number 9. I had to do an actual journalism for this bit, and I don't think I've got to the bottom of everything. But in 2002, First Leeds registered a number 9 bus running daytime-only services between Pudsey and Seacroft via the White Rose. The route was significantly amended in 2011, extending the western end of service to Horsforth. It was rerouted in 2016 through Middleton and curtailed in 2017 to just the western arc between Horsforth and the White Rose, with the addition of Service 9A's early morning, late evening and Sunday services between the White Rose and Seacroft, which were, and continue to be, subsidised by Metro. Finally, on the 2nd of April 2023, the daytime Service 9 was withdrawn, except for one journey a day. You see, it's easier to scale back a transport service to an unuseful minimum, what's known as a parliamentary service, than it is to cancel one outright. But that's a can of worms I'm not going anywhere near. However, on the 3rd of April 2023, the very next day, a new daytime Service 9 started, run by a small operator called Yorkshire Buses. From what I can tell, this looks to be an almost exact copy of the cancelled service between Horsforth and the White Rose. It was a very short notice registration. They announced they were going to do it just 4 days prior. Typically, bus services are decided at least a month and a half in advance. It didn't last long because on Christmas Eve 2023, the route was taken over by SquarePeg. Still with me? It gets worse. In 2017, when First Leeds cut the service short, SquarePeg decided that they were going to take over the rest of the route. Perhaps sensibly, though actually stubbornly, they decided to keep the service number 9. But this now led to 2 companies running 2 separate number 9s out of the White Rose, which neither company wanted to give up the number of. Seriously, I found an article in Yorkshire Live in which both companies were interviewed and stubbornly refused to renumber. This wasn't a problem at first because you could tell which number 9 it was by looking at the front of the bus. In 2019, however, the route was extended to Horsforth, this time from the eastern end. That led to a period of about 6 years where, if you're standing at the White Rose and, for example, you want to go to Middleton, which bus do you get? Do you get the number 9 to Horsforth or the number 9 to Horsforth? Yeah, it really was that confusing. Oh, and from what I can tell, they both went from the same stand. Fortunately, in 2023, after SquarePeg took over Yorkshire Buses number 9, this route was sensibly renumbered to 10, solving the problem. Once the dust had settled, SquarePeg sensibly merged the 2 routes into one circular service, the 99C, which is where we are today. SquarePeg's fleet seems to consist entirely of Enviro 200 MIDI buses, mostly bought from other operators, but as the company has grown, they've also bought a handful of new ones. I don't want to focus too much on the vehicles themselves, but I do feel I need to explain for people who aren't transport nerds like me. A minibus is basically a minibus with delusions of grandeur. A minibus is about the size of a van, usually seats a dozen or so people, 2 dozen at most. A midibus is a longer, slightly wider minibus, with a few extra rows of seating and more standing room. It's shorter than a full-size bus, usually slightly narrower too, making it easier to fit down narrow suburban streets. In these two particular models, the comfort isn't the greatest. You definitely feel a bit crammed in. But I didn't have aching butt syndrome after 2 hours and change, so I'll call that a win. Just by virtue of the sheer length of the route, it is quite varied. There are a lot of towns and villages along the route, but there's also a lot of in-between bits. By which I mean fast roads with very little of note along them, like this one. And therein lies the problem. The number 9 is not the fastest way from A to B for almost any combination of A and B. It doesn't go anywhere near the city centre, so it's not going to attract much in the way of leisure traffic. It goes between similar-sized towns on the outskirts of Leeds, most of which have similar shops and services. Now, I'm travelling off-peak as is my way. I can imagine there is some commuter ridership at peak times, but probably not much. Also, I should point out that people who live along the route between towns did get on, in 1s and 2s, to ride into the nearest large town, but there didn't seem to be anyone, except me, making a longer journey, and I think the reason for that is just how infrequent the number 9 buses are. There are just 8 full route journeys a day in each direction, with a handful of part route journeys. Being a smaller bus company, real-time data's not really available either. With all that in mind, would you rely on it? I sure wouldn't. With that, we have reached our final stop for today. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon where you can watch these videos free and ad-free, or sign up for a monthly membership to get them whenever they happen to be done. And whatever else, don't forget to thank your driver. Oh, and there's also the 9A. It's an early morning, late evening Sunday bus between the White Rose and Seacroft. I think I touched on it earlier, it's all that's left of the first number 9. But it shares its route with the 9 and the 9C, so there's nothing else to say. Tick.